If you've been on social media at all over the past week, you might have heard a lot of people talk about Psychonauts 2, and the Invincibility option they plan on adding to the game. To nobody's surprise, the waves of quote-unquote hardcore gamers weren't happy with the decision. This isn't the first time people have argued about how difficulty should be handled in new games, but this is the first time I'm really able to share my thoughts on it, so that's what I'm going to do. But before that, I wanted to say if you haven't considered subscribing to the channel or liking the video, I hope you think about it. That way you can stay up to date anytime I post a new video. Now let's talk about difficulty in games and why this has been blowing up on Twitter. Last week, Double Fine made the announcement that Psychonauts 2 is going to have the option to turn on Invincibility at any point in the game. Now, personally, I still have flashbacks to the meat circus from when I played Psychonauts on Xbox.
Oh, I got you, Mr. Funny!
But for those who don't get what the big deal is, I'll talk about why Double Fine decided on this and what led to this decision. Over the past 10 years, games have been getting the itch to become more challenging, ramping up with each release, trying to mimic the Dark Souls style of difficulty. It started to feel as though every game was another attempt at getting you to break a controller, like the first time you fought the Four Kings. Everyone was talking about how games like Dark Souls were so tough to beat, like some sort of online pissing contest. Oh, you struggle with that boss in Anor Londo? Well, I beat that on my first try. Since then, we've seen everyone and their grandmother talking about how game developers should add this difficulty, or shouldn't have this option, because it's not the experience the developers wanted. But I need to ask why. Who gives a shit if you beat the game without using any items or without getting hit? Now, before I have all the Dark Souls fans knocking at my door, let me explain what I'm talking about. If you choose to play one of these games as a challenge run, that's fine. I'm still impressed when I see a new speedrun of Dark Souls, or when someone beats the game with the bongos from Donkey Kong. But let me ask you this. Do you really think the developers made that game for someone to play through without leveling or upgrading their gear? No matter if you agree with it or not, these developers spent years working on these games, balancing the areas and different levels for what they thought was the right amount of challenge. It's not like they just randomly decided to have 3 enemies instead of just throwing a swarm of skeletons and calling it a day. These areas are carefully balanced to be something fun that you can go up against, but that's by no means the be-all end-all of difficulty. Personally, I've played through enough roguelikes and Souls games that my friends have asked me,
"You good, dude? You don't seem like you're having fun."
To which I'm normally saying, I'm either going to kill this boss or I'm going to figure out what the inside of my Xbox looks like firsthand. When it comes to a challenge, I'm no stranger to it. I got Platinum God on Binding of Isaac back in the day, and I played through all the Dark Souls games, and even beat Psychonauts when I was younger. I've seen it all before, from games that I could beat without breaking a sweat, to a game that made me turn off my console and go for a walk to think about my life. But one thing holds true. Difficulty doesn't matter when it comes to enjoying a game. What I mean is, the gatekeeping around games has to stop. Yeah, you might be able to beat any of these games, because you've played every Souls game that's come out over the past 10 years, but that isn't the case for everyone. Yeah, it might be really rewarding to beat that boss on your first try, but that doesn't mean that's the only way it should be done. And we shouldn't be putting other people down because they've had a hard time with it. Now, I'm making this video because of what's been going on with Psychonauts 2. Double Fine announced they were adding an option to toggle invincibility at any point during the game. A lot of people started to get mad at them, saying things like, you're experiencing the game, but you're not beating it. But you have to ask why it matters. If someone else played the game with invincibility, it doesn't affect how you play the game. A lot of the criticism for this came from the people who would hunt for achievements. They're worried this is going to ruin their achievement because someone else could get them with invincibility. Achievements started off as a way to share the stuff you did in a game with your friends. Sometimes they're things like beating a game on the hardest difficulty or finishing the collectibles. But let's not kid ourselves here. They're just a number and an icon for doing something in a game, not some insane show of skill. Yeah, you have games with achievements for beating the entire game without taking damage, like Mega Man 10's Mr. Perfect. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have games like The Simpsons, which literally will give you an achievement for hitting start. There isn't a standard for them. Every game can decide what they want for achievements and what rules they have for them. But that doesn't mean that should be the deciding factor for a game's difficulty. But let's put that aside for a second. Do these people really care about what their gamer score is? They only play the hardest games out there and would never be caught dead playing something as easy as a simple platformer. I have to call bullshit, because most of the people who actually push for the highest gamer score are the same people who will buy a game just for easy achievements. Achievements were made to be a fun way to compare what you did in a game with friends, not a pissing contest for who's the better gamer. Double Fine knows how to make a game that is a challenge. All of these people complaining about their decision to add invincibility are worried their accomplishments aren't going to be impressive because other people can do the same thing. But Double Fine knows that there's a lot of people who never finished the original Psychonauts because of the difficulty spike towards the end of the game, specifically in the meat circus. The artists and developers that make these games aren't just making it for someone who's willing to yell obscenities at their screen for hours. They make these games to share their fun ideas with the world. Double Fine is all about making something with interesting characters and original stories that aren't like the rest of the games that come out nowadays. Their whole company is based around the idea of letting artists express their creativity through things like game jams and an emphasis on making games that people haven't experienced before. And with that comes the hurdle of getting new people to play these games, some of which might not be able to when a game has a difficulty as big as those gatekeepers' egos. Back in 2018, Microsoft released their adaptive controller, and while most people will never see one of these in person, let alone own one, it got a lot of people sharing their experience with games. The adaptive controller was designed from the ground up to let people who didn't have the option to play games a chance to enjoy these experiences themselves. Someone who might not be able to hold a regular Xbox controller can use this to enjoy these games. And saying a game shouldn't have difficulty options is downright saying someone with a disability shouldn't have the chance to play these games. Double Fine made the right decision. Games are much more than their challenge, and offering something like an invincibility mode lets more people play them. Just because it isn't how you want to play the game doesn't mean it's wrong. A lot of gamers love to act like they're experts in how games should be played, but if that means someone interested in a game can't play it because you're worried about it not being a challenge, then you don't realize what gaming is about. Everyone can play games in their own way, and when it comes to a single player game, if someone wants to play a game on a lower difficulty, it shouldn't matter. And instead of bitching on Twitter about how Double Fine shouldn't add accessibility options, you should spend some time talking to those people, instead of just letting what games you beat be the only part of your personality. Peace.